A few months ago, I was grabbing coffee with an old friend. She's always been, the voice of reason in our circle.
The spreadsheet person.
The spreadsheet person, exactly. Reads all the fine print. Anyway, she'd recently joined an online community, a fan group for a popular idol, and she called it a wholesome escape from her job.
Mm-hmm.
And her face just lit up when she talked about the sisterhood she'd found. She said she finally felt like she belonged somewhere.
That's a powerful feeling.
It is. But then as we kept talking, the topic shifted to a rival group in the same industry. And in an instant, her entire demeanor changed. The calm, analytical woman I knew just vanished.
Yeah.
Her voice got sharp. Her eyes narrowed with this genuine, cold intensity.
Wow.
She started using words like vile, trash, enemies to describe performers she'd never even met. She showed me this thread on her phone where thousands of people were coordinating to, and I'm quoting, annihilate the reputation of a young singer over some tiny perceived slight. Yeah. And when I asked her if this felt a bit extreme, she didn't give me a logical argument. She just leaned in and said, with this terrifying level of certainty, you don't understand. If you aren't one of us, you're the problem.
Chilling.
That shift from a rational person to this fervent, unrecognizable soldier for a cause, it just stunned me. It wasn't about music anymore. It was about an identity that required the total erasure of her own critical thinking. Maybe think of this observation by Friedrich Nietzsche. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. So why? Why is it that the moment we find our tribe, we so often seem to lose our minds? Why do groups, fan clubs, political movements, entire nations tend to drift toward the most extreme, risky, and irrational corners of human behavior? Today, we're doing a deep dive into the psychological machinery of groupthink to understand how our biological need for belonging is being used to bypass our brains and turn us into part of a mad collective.
That story about your friend it's perfect because it really illustrates the central paradox of being human, doesn't it? We form groups for survival, for cohesion. It's a biological imperative.
Right, we need to belong.
But that very cohesion often comes at this incredibly steep cost, which is our critical thinking, our own independent rationality.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start with the core definition. We throw the word groupthink around a lot, but I think people just confuse it with, bad teamwork or a bad meeting.
Yeah.
What is it psychologically?
At its heart, groupthink is a phenomenon where the desire for consensus and for unity within a group, it completely overrides the motivation to realistically appraise alternatives.
Or to even look at the information critically.
Exactly. It's less about making a bad decision and more about making a bad decision without any argument. The group becomes so invested in maintaining that internal harmony that individual members will actively avoid conflict. They'll avoid looking at facts, even when those facts are screaming that the whole plan is flawed.
So the goal isn't let's find the best solution anymore. It's let's find a decision everyone can agree on quickly and quietly so nobody feels uncomfortable.
That is the key distinction. They confuse alignment with silent agreement. The group thinks it's being cohesive and smart because nobody's raising a dissenting voice, but really they're just settling for a compromise solution that's, it's often profoundly ill-conceived.
The need to belong trumps the need to be correct.
In essence, yes.
And once that critical filter is gone, once we voluntarily give it up for the sake of the group doesn't just stop at a mediocre decision. It often starts moving toward the extreme.
That's right. And this brings us to what's really the engine of that extremism. It's a concept called group shift, and its origin, which is the risky shift.
Group shift is so counterintuitive. You'd think that if you get a bunch of people together with different opinions, the final decision would be somewhere in the moderate middle. An average of everyone's ideas.
That's the common sense expectation, but it's wrong. Group shift is the tendency for the initial opinions of individual members to be exaggerated toward a more extreme position after they talk about it. So if you have a group of people who are slightly conservative on a topic,
they become more conservative after the discussion.
Exactly. And if they're slightly risk-seeking, they become reckless.
I always thought group discussion was supposed to temper extreme ideas, to find a compromise and meet in the middle, pick the safe option. Why does it push us further out to the edge instead of pulling us to the center?
That's the crucial finding. This idea was first formalized as the risky shift phenomenon by a researcher named James Stoner back in 1961. He demonstrated that groups consistently chose riskier options than the average individual member said they would support on their own.
And risk here isn't just about, financial risk or physical danger.
It's broader. It's about an increased possibility of any negative outcome.
And to be clear, group shift isn't only about becoming more reckless. It just amplifies whatever the group was already leaning toward.
Precisely. If the members are initially risk-averse, the group decision becomes even more cautious. Psychologists sometimes call this a conservative shift or a stingy shift.
Right.
So imagine a committee deciding whether to fund some new experimental art program. If every member is already a little skeptical, the group discussion won't lead to a moderate compromise. It'll probably lead to them shutting the program down completely, citing even the most minor, implausible risks as absolute deal breakers.
But the more dangerous side, the side that gets back to my friend's fanaticism, is that reckless amplification. The collective recklessness.
And that's where group shift gets its notoriety. If the members are already leaning toward a risk, that collective discussion transforms the idea into something far more reckless or extreme.
But why? What happens in that conversation?
Two things, mainly. Argumentation and social comparison. First, individuals hear new arguments supporting their initial risky inclination, which validates it. Second, they see they aren't the only ones who feel this way, and they feel pressure to seem more committed or more enthusiastic than the average member to maintain their status in the group.
So there's a bit of one-upmanship.
A kind of risk-taking one-upmanship, yes.
That feeling of safety in numbers is such a trap. We think the group protects us from making mistakes, but really the group is just giving us permission to suspend our common sense. It takes away the personal anxiety of taking a big, maybe even destructive step.
Absolutely. Think about a corporate boardroom. Let's say you have 5 highly cautious financial analysts. Alone, each would run the numbers 10 times over before making a move.
Right.
But together, a junior member pitches a once-in-a-decade offshore venture. No one wants to be the wet blanket or the coward, so they don't just agree. They start one-upping each other, arguing for the risk, making the group's final decision far more aggressive than any single one of them would have dared to make alone.
They're fueling each other's confidence, convincing themselves that the combined brain power of the group makes them infallible.
And when you look at high-stakes environments where the consequences of this are truly tragic, you find cases like the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in 1986.
This is such a devastating example of group shift in action. The launch team decided to proceed even though the temperature was dangerously low. What was it, 36 degrees Fahrenheit?
Way below the established 50-degree minimum for the O-rings. And the problem wasn't a lack of data.
Not at all.
NASA engineers, especially at the contractor Morton Thiokol, had privately and repeatedly warned of the catastrophic danger the cold posed to those O-rings, the gaskets in the rocket boosters. They had the evidence. They'd seen damage on previous launches at warmer temperatures. Yet, the collective decision by the launch management team was to launch.
How does that happen? How do these brilliant, highly trained professionals just override clear life-or-death engineering data?
Well, psychological autopsies of that decision-making process show that in that high-pressure environment, the motivation to maintain the launch schedule, a form of group cohesion, it just overrode their technical objectivity. They dismissed the engineers' concerns as just pessimism.
So they weren't weighing the data, they were weighing the social cost of delaying.
Yes, and psychologists have noted that many of those individuals at NASA almost certainly would not have made that call alone. But in that pressurized group context, they succumbed to the consensus. The O-ring failed 73 seconds into the flight. The cost of avoiding conflict was 7 lives.
It makes you wonder what kind of structural pressure allows that to happen. It's not just peer pressure, it's institutional.
It was institutionalized groupthink. You had these different levels of management, and the technical concerns from the engineers at level 3 were filtered as they moved up. The managers were literally told to put on their management hats and stop acting like engineers.
Put on your management hat. That's a subtle way of demanding groupthink.
It is.
And that dynamic, how individual responsibility gets diluted in a big system, that brings us right back to the core mechanism that allows all this to flourish. The diffusion of responsibility, or DOOR.
DOOR is the psychological safety net that allows the risky shift to even happen. It's a phenomenon where an individual is far less likely to feel personal responsibility for doing something or for not doing something when other people are present.
You just assume someone else will handle it.
You assume others are responsible or have already taken the necessary steps. So in that angry mob or in that toxic fan community coordinating an online attack, nobody feels like they are the one delivering the final destructive blow. The blame is fractured. It's diluted across thousands of people.
The feeling of safety in numbers is completely deceptive.
It is. It's the mechanism that gives group members psychological free rein to be reckless. The anxiety of the risk gets divided across the whole group, which is why the risky shift effect becomes dramatically stronger as the group gets bigger.
The larger the group, the less responsible any one person feels.
Right.
You can be extreme without being accountable.
And you see this play out most clearly, and maybe most heartbreakingly, in the classic bystander effect.
This is the most well-studied form of DOR.
It is. The pioneering studies by Darley and Latene demonstrated this with painful clarity. They simulated an emergency participants thought they were hearing someone have a seizure over an intercom,
Right.
and they tracked who intervened.
And the numbers were just shocking.
They were. When participants believed they were the only witness to the emergency, a staggering 85% intervened right away. They felt total personal responsibility.
Of course.
But when they believed there were 4 other people listening in, the intervention rate plummeted to just 31%.
31%. So almost 70% of people did nothing.
They did nothing, assuming one of the other 4 would surely step up.
That inertia, it's terrifying. And this mechanism, it extends way beyond emergencies into the white-collar world, into corporations.
Oh, absolutely. DOR is central to explaining why complex bureaucratic structures enable what we call moral disengagement. When labor is divided into all these specialized little tasks, people become narrowly focused on their own functional job, managing the spreadsheet, routing the email, signing off on one small part, and they forget their moral responsibility to the bigger picture.
They diffuse accountability away from themselves and onto the abstract system.
So my friend with the spreadsheets, she could easily justify toxic behavior by saying, well, I'm just doing my small part. I'm not the one making the final call.
It's the classic corporate excuse. I just manage the budget. I don't set the policy, or I just moderate the forum. I don't write the hate posts.
Yeah.
They focus on their little box, which lets them feel like they have a clean conscience, even as the whole group is veering towards disaster.
And when you look at the most chilling applications of DOR, it's not just about corporate failure, it's about massive historical atrocities.
Right. It's been used as a legal and ethical defense.
It has. You think of the war crimes trials at Nuremberg after World War II, or in the context of the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. Soldiers claimed they were just following orders.
Displacing their personal moral responsibility onto the chain of command, or just the amorphous structure of the military itself?
It shows that the group dynamic doesn't just enable risk. It can enable monstrous behavior by dissolving the personal ethical cost of that behavior.
An individual bound by their own conscience could never achieve that level of amoral efficiency on their own.
It's the ultimate ethical loophole the group provides. You get all the comfort and power of collective action without any of the personal psychological burden of accountability.
So if that is the psychological machinery, groupthink, risky shift, and Dara, then social media seems like it was perfectly engineered to exploit every single one of those tendencies at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone from the boardroom in the town square to a digital landscape that is optimized to make us abandon rationality in huge numbers.
The digital age has taken these innate human tendencies and just poured gasoline on them. It's put them under intense algorithmic pressure. We're not just dealing with groupthink anymore, we're dealing with algorithmic radicalization, which is really just the accelerated, automated version of it.
Okay, so let's distinguish the mechanics here. We hear the terms filter bubbles and echo chambers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
How exactly do the platforms build them?
So the filter bubble is the first step. It's the engagement mechanism. The platforms track everything you do, your likes, how long you watch a video, what you scroll past quickly, and they use that to personalize your feed. The algorithm creates this unique universe of information tailored just for you.
It's designed to make sure you only see what will keep you engaged right now.
Exactly. The bubble is your personalized, narrow stream of information designed for maximum stickiness. And the echo chamber is what happens when those personalized bubbles merge with other like-minded individuals.
Okay.
An echo chamber forms when users, guided by that algorithm, come together into these closed systems where their beliefs just reinforce each other. They actively exclude dissenting opinions, and they spread information that validates their existing worldview. This leads directly to extreme confirmation bias and polarization.
So it's a self-reinforcing loop. The platform tells you what you want to hear, and then the group you're in tells you it's the only truth that exists.
And what's really disturbing is the profit motive behind this whole structure. We've all seen the leaked internal documents, like the Facebook files. They revealed a very stark truth.
That maximizing profit means optimizing for engagement above all else.
And what maximizes engagement?
Conflict, friction, outrage.
That's right. The internal research found that hate, misinformation, and politics are the kinds of content that maximize user retention. The more incendiary the material, the more the algorithm boosts it, because it triggers a powerful response in us that translates into immediate interaction.
So the platform isn't designed to connect us or inform us. It's actively selecting for the most divisive, explosive content, because that's what keeps our eyeballs glued to the screen. It's a business model built on division.
And this has measurable consequences. We know, for instance, that false rumors spread dramatically faster and wider than true information. On Twitter, they're 70% more likely to be retweeted. They reach 1,500 people 6 times faster than verified truth.
The system is designed for speed and outrage, not accuracy.
It prioritizes virality over nuance. It effectively weaponizes our own psychological tendencies against us.
Let's delve into that specific psychological feedback loop, starting with confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias is the bedrock of all of this. It's our natural human tendency to seek out, favor, and remember information that already fits with what we believe.
And we actively avoid things that challenge us.
We do. And the algorithm doesn't create this bias, but it exploits and reinforces it, creating this self-reinforcing spiral that traps you in a worldview of your own making. The algorithm shapes what information is even available to you, and your confirmation bias ensures you only click on the parts that support your view, which systematically shifts your whole perspective toward the extreme.
And if that narrow world is challenged, it causes that uncomfortable internal feeling we talked about. Cognitive dissonance.
Precisely. Cognitive dissonance is that mental discomfort you get from holding two contradictory beliefs. Like, you care about animal welfare, but you also eat meat. Humans are hardwired to want consistency, so we're pressured to reduce that dissonance.
Usually by changing the belief or the behavior.
Right. But echo chambers offer a third, much easier path.
Validation.
Validation. If you feel bad about your belief, an echo chamber of supportive users who offer justifications and rationalizations immediately reduces that discomfort.
You don't have to change or reflect. You just get told you were right all along.
Exactly. The discussion with like-minded people reinforces the perceived correctness of your belief. And research shows that the act of publicly committing to a thought like posting something inflammatory online, like your friend did, dramatically increases your commitment to it. Every share serves as social validation that decreases that cognitive dissonance and boosts your attitude to be even more extreme.
So we're not just passively absorbing this stuff, we're actively committing to more extreme stances just to feel psychologically stable and validated within our digital tribe.
And this whole structure is built on a fundamental biological urge. Homophily.
Love of the same.
Our innate preference to connect with people who are similar to us, who share our values and beliefs.
This has existed forever, but social media just scales it up massively.
By removing geographical limits, social media allows for the rapid formation of these highly homogeneous, highly polarized groups that would never have found each other in the real world. Instead of being the one extreme person in your small town, you can now connect with a million other extreme people across the globe.
And that latent extremism becomes an organized, motivated collective.
And this is exactly where you see the phenomenon of toxic fandoms emerge. There are these highly engaging subcultures that are just ruthlessly exploited by the algorithm.
They're the perfect manifestation of the outrage economy.
They are. Fan communities are already emotionally invested, and that engagement, especially the extreme behavior that seeks attention and validation, is precisely what the algorithm rewards and boosts. The group starts to define itself not just by what they love, but by who they hate.
I read this story about a young woman, a member of a popular idol's fan circle. It started out innocently, but the moment the algorithm started feeding her these perceived slights from a rival group, the whole dynamic shifted from appreciation to warfare.
And that shift from passive appreciation to active hostility is a key indicator of group shift. In those groups, moderation is often seen as treason. It requires you to step outside the consensus. To stay in the in-group, she was forced to escalate her behavior, typing things she would never, ever say in person.
The algorithm created a war, and the group dynamic demanded soldiers.
And it's easy to judge these people, but the platforms are exploiting the deep evolutionary need for connection. The pain of being cast out of that digital tribe is a very real psychological threat, and it forces people into more and more extreme behavior just to feel like they belong.
And this system, this algorithmic radicalization.
Yeah.
It's taken to its most dangerous extreme when it's furnished by actual terrorist organizations.
We've seen extremist groups, including jihadist organizations, expertly use platforms like TikTok to spread propaganda and incite real-world violence.
That seems like such a strange pairing. TikTok, a platform for dance challenges, being used for radicalization. How does the For You page enable that?
It's the personalization that makes it so effective. The FYP optimizes ruthlessly for engagement. So if a user interacts even slightly with a video that has some political frustration or maybe violence or some historical grievance,
Which can overlap with extremist narratives.
right, the algorithm will interpret that as interest and start feeding them increasingly niche, more extreme, tailored content. It can essentially self-radicalize a user by feeding them a steady, escalating stream of propaganda.
And this isn't just a theory. This is translating directly into violence.
We have concrete examples. In early 2023, authorities in Austria thwarted a plot that was targeting an LGBTQ+ pride parade. The suspects were teenagers who had been inspired by jihadist content they saw on TikTok. The youngest was only 14.
14.
He'd been exposed to videos glorifying violence, which led him down this path of deeper and deeper engagement with extremist material, and it culminated in him planning an actual attack.
That progression from casual scrolling to real-world terrorist plotting, it just shows the sheer speed of this mechanism. And this power to foster a false sense of intimacy is what also blurs the lines between public figures and private life. It intensifies these parasocial boundaries.
Parasocial relationships, that one-sided connection fans feel to a celebrity they don't know, they're not new. They've existed since radio and TV.
But social media has fundamentally changed them.
It's intensified them. Fans used to engage with artists through mediated channels. Now, platforms give this false sense of daily, unfiltered access through stories, lives, direct messages. It blurs the boundaries profoundly.
The fan feels entitled to the intimacy that the platform has cultivated. And when the celebrity tries to put a boundary back up, the reaction can be toxic.
It creates a huge backlash because the fans see it as a personal rejection, a denial of the relationship they thought they had built. We saw this with the artist Chappell Roan. Her rise was driven heavily by these constant TikTok posts that fostered that feeling of genuine, intimate connection.
And when she posted a video asking fans to stop yelling at her or invading her family's privacy, a completely reasonable request,
she faced immediate, intense backlash. The feeling among some fans is, you gave me this intimacy and now you're taking it away. They lash out to protect their own self-image within the group. The very behavior the platforms encourage, this intense personal connection, is paradoxically destroying the ability of artists to have a healthy life.
The interaction stops being about valuing the art and becomes about commodifying the interaction itself. The goal isn't connection, it's getting the perfect video clip that will become content, get likes, and boost the fans' status within their group.
The surveillance is constant, and the sense of entitlement is overwhelming. The irony is that the very tools that satisfy our biological need to belong are creating this environment of intense psychological pressure and radicalized behavior.
Which leads to the next critical question. How do we break these cycles? Especially in high-stakes environments, like a corporation or a government, where the decisions have huge consequences.
If the group is where rationality often goes to die, then you have to find strategies that actively reintroduce constructive conflict and critical thinking.
Let's start with a huge cost of always avoiding disagreement, the organizational and financial cost.
We have to acknowledge that paradox of harmony, confusing silent agreement with true alignment. People suppress dissent to feel safe, but the cost of that silence can be catastrophic. I mean, look at the massive crisis at Credit Suisse. They were hit with a staggering $5.5 billion loss after the collapse of Archegos Capital.
A mind-boggling failure. And what did the analysis find was the root cause, beyond just the bad trades?
The independent report pointed directly to a cultural unwillingness to challenge leaders, even when the financial risks were becoming alarmingly obvious to middle managers.
So it was group shift and groupthink at the executive level.
Exactly. The failure wasn't just poor trading, it was a systemic failure of governance, where no one felt safe enough to voice the critical concerns that would challenge where senior management wanted to go.
So the culture demands silence, and the safety checks, the critical appraisal of risk, are automatically bypassed.
Right, and think of the time and money wasted on unproductive meetings where employees just sit silently, engaging in self-censorship. They don't just shut down, they go back to their desks and engage in negative workplace gossip, which poisons the culture even more.
That suppressed energy doesn't just disappear, it just becomes destructive gossip instead of productive dissent. So leaders have to actively flip that script. They have to signal that they value challenges to the status quo.
I was reading that a director at a major museum in Athens who was facing this deeply contentious situation about repatriating ancient artifacts.
Oh, that's a politically charged topic.
Incredibly charged. And her team was leaning toward this highly confrontational stance that would likely sever ties with crucial international partners. She realized the group was drifting into group shift territory, amplifying the nationalist, risk-seeking emotion.
That's a perfect storm for groupthink.
It is. So instead of asking for consensus, she implemented a deliberate strategy. She assigned 2 of her most senior respected curators to act as professional dissenters. Their only job, regardless of what they privately believed, was to identify every possible flaw and catastrophic scenario in the confrontational plan.
She created an explicit, safe zone for disagreement.
And she turned conflict from an act of personal defiance into a required functional task. This strategy has a formal name, officially appointing a devil's advocate.
And the key is making it official and ideally rotating the role.
Yes. If the role rotates, no one gets branded as the perpetual no person. It makes challenging assumptions a matter of procedure, not personality, which is crucial for bringing blind spots to light.
Another key element here is how the leader presents their own initial stance. If that museum director had walked in and said, "I think we should take the confrontational stance," the whole dynamic would have collapsed.
Absolutely. Leaders have to model non-directional leadership. They have to avoid voicing strong opinions early on. The moment a leader shows their preference, it generates this powerful in-group solidarity and immediately discourages honest input. Everyone just wants to agree with the boss.
We saw this play out in the media world with the famous Letterman versus Leno case study at a major network. The leadership expressed strong support for Leno early in the process.
And that early preference, however subtle, created such a sense of pre-commitment that the team failed to explore any strategic alternatives. They just focused on executing the known path Leno, and they missed innovative, riskier, but potentially much more rewarding paths for the network's future because they thought the decision was already made.
A leader's job is to open the space, not predetermine the outcome.
And if you can't rely just on the leader's behavior, you can implement specific structural frameworks.
Right, like structured discussion models.
They're highly effective because they force different roles and perspectives onto the participants. The classic example is the 6 hats method.
Can you walk us through how those hats work in a business meeting?
Sure. So each hat represents a role. The white hat focuses only on objective data, the facts. The black hat is the devil's advocate. They focus only on flaws, risks, why the idea might fail. Then the yellow hat focuses only on the positives, the benefits, the optimism. By having the whole group switch hats together, you force them out of their personal biases and into a structured exploration of the idea from every angle.
That seems incredibly effective at preventing those quick, surface-level agreements.
It is. And beyond structure, we need to focus on the language of dissent itself. Leaders have to signal very clearly that they are actively seeking challenges, not just fishing for compliments.
Because a generic question like, "What do you all think?" or "Any comments?" is just too easy to ignore.
Exactly. Research shows those vague questions are ineffective. They only get a useful challenge about half the time because they imply the leader is just looking for affirmation. Subordinates, especially introverts, will just stay silent.
So we need better questions.
You have to invert the language. Instead of asking, "Does everyone agree?" you ask, "What are the potential risks we haven't considered?" Or, my favorite, "If we launch this today, what is the single most likely reason it will fail?"
That signals that disagreement is not only welcome, it's required.
But the research also shows that just asking the right question isn't enough. The crucial moment is what happens after someone voices a challenge.
Right. It's about how the leader responds.
That's the most critical piece. The leader has to explicitly acknowledge the legitimacy of the challenge. Generic praise like "thanks for your input" is actually counterproductive. It feels like lip service. Studies found a follow-up challenge only happened 29% of the time after that kind of vague response.
But when leaders use specific validation,
Specific targeted validation like, "That's a valid concern about the timeline," or "I hadn't considered that regulatory angle, thank you," was profoundly more effective. This specific acknowledgement validated the dissenter, signaled the value of the challenge to the whole team, and led to further high-quality challenges an astonishing 87% of the time.
that fundamentally shifts the internal cost-benefit analysis for the employee. They realize the payoff for speaking up is real validation, not just a pat on the head.
Which brings us to the final strategy, which links directly back to diffusion of responsibility. You have to increase accountability.
How so?
When leaders make team members personally responsible for the success or failure of an idea, forcing them to state their preferred option and be tied to it, people are much more likely to challenge decisions they disagree with. If the consequence of staying silent is a personal failure, the cost of silence suddenly becomes too high.
It's the ultimate incentive to overcome that natural tendency toward self-censorship.
And in very high-stakes environments, you have to widen the debate even further, using techniques like red teaming and pre-mortems. Red teaming means you deliberately introduce an adversarial viewpoint to try and break the plan.
And the pre-mortem forces a cognitive shift, right?
Yeah, it does. It requires the team to imagine it's 6 months in the future, and the plan has already failed catastrophically. Then they have to work backward to identify every possible flaw and mistake that must have happened to cause that failure. It forces the team to step outside the safety of the consensus bubble and confront reality.
So good leadership isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about engineering the right kind of conflict at the right time.
And finally, you have to provide time and space. Rushed decisions are inherently corrosive because they suppress useful challenges. Allowing enough time for discussion and feedback, including outside the meeting, via email or one-on-ones, ensures you get quality input from everyone, especially the introverts who might be intimidated by the louder voices in the room.
This whole deep dive. It's been a journey from that basic biological urge to belong, through the psychological mechanics that turn belonging into collective madness, and finally to these intentional leadership strategies we can use to restore some sanity.
And the key synthesis here is recognizing that the biological urge for belonging homophily, it's neutral, but it's powerfully exploited by digital platforms. Those platforms use algorithms and the outrage economy to funnel us into echo chambers. And once we're inside, the mechanisms of risky shift and diffused responsibility transform our moderate individual views into extreme collective actions.
It's a high-speed recipe for collective irrationality. The impulse to blend in, to seek that psychological safety, is precisely what leads to catastrophic failures and destructive mobs. The irony is that the moment we feel safest in the group is often the moment we're about to make our worst decision.
And the ultimate insight that ties all of this together, from the medieval mob to the modern boardroom, is that true rationality often requires the difficult, ego-bruising act of standing apart, of examining the facts for yourself and challenging the narrative, even when the whole epoch, as Nietzsche put it, seems to have gone mad.